And as the year 2025 starts, Russian President Vladimir Putin also marks 25 years of being in office. And in a New Year's Eve speech, President Putin praised his country's achievements, saying Russians should be proud of what Russia has done during his quarter century in power. Our next report decoding and telling you more about the story of the leader who transformed a lost superpower. Take a look.
The dawn of 2025 marks not just Putin's 25th year in power, but potentially the beginning of Russia's resurgent century. As Ukraine enters its fourth year of conflict, despite thousands of sanctions imposed by the West, Russia emerges stronger and increasingly influential in reshaping the global order. On the global stage, Putin positioned himself as a staunch defender of Russian sovereignty. From Clinton to Trump, from Blair to Starmer, from Merkel to Scholz, leaders came and went, but Russia remains firmly under Putin's control. Putin's persona is larger than life, built on carefully crafted displays of strength, discipline and control. Whether flying a strategic bomber, diving to the depths of Lake Baikal in a submarine, or hunting tigers in Siberia, these stunts aren't mere theatrics. They symbolize his projection of dominance, both domestically and internationally.
Quite simply, we are stronger than all the others because we are right. Strength lies in truth. When Russia is right, she is invincible.
His ability to blend calculated pragmatism with moments of personal flares, such as playing the piano while awaiting Chinese President Xi Jinping, underscores the charisma that has kept him at the center of global attention for a quarter of a century. Despite thousands of Western sanctions, Russia's economy shows remarkable adaptability. Russian gas finds new markets in Asia, while parallel import schemes ensure European luxury goods still flow into Moscow stores. From Chinese yuan to Indian rupees, Russia's trade bypasses the dollar system entirely. The so-called economic blitzkrieg that was meant to cripple Russia instead accelerated its pivot east. A key feature of Putin's presidency is his adaptability. He has shown the ability to navigate complex domestic and international challenges, from economic reforms in the early 2000s to managing geopolitical crises in later years. This adaptability, combined with his deep understanding of Russian history and culture, has allowed him to maintain a strong connection with his citizens. Western critics have accused Putin of suppressing free speech and targeting opposition members. But for Russians, he remains the strongman who is reasserting Russia's growth and stability in an era of global uncertainty. As the world watches, the Putin century may well prove to be a defining chapter in Russia's history, a time when a leader transformed a lost superpower into a confident global force.
We now talk about the brutal, forgotten wars of Africa that have left behind a trail of death and destruction across the continent. These battles stretch from Mali in the west to Somalia on the Eastern Horn. Africa has entered a new era of warfare, yet this rise in violence has largely gone unnoticed in a way, overshadowed by the wars in Ukraine and West Asia. Take a look.
Africa's ongoing conflicts are exacerbating governance crises across the continent, further destabilizing already fragile regions and creating opportunities for foreign exploitation through proxy forces, resource trafficking and manipulation of information. Militant Islamist violence and fatalities in Africa reached record highs in 2024, largely due to the ongoing extreme violence in the Sahel. This region alone accounted for over half of all militant Islamist activity on the continent, with fatalities nearly tripling since 2020 to around 11,000. Groups such as the Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslim, in coalition with Islamic State in the Greater Sahara, have escalated their attacks and expanded their control over territories in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, advancing further south and west. Foreign authoritarian actor, primarily Russia, China and increasingly Iran, have facilitated the democratic backsliding witnessed in Africa in recent years through alleged disinformation, direct election interference, deployment of mercenaries, support for extra-constitutional seizures of power and undermining of the United Nations. These foreign actors have attempted to prop up undemocratic authorities and normalize authoritarianism while paralyzing popular sovereignty as a means of expanding their influence on Africa. The conflict between Sudan's military factions has turned the country into the world's largest displacement crisis. Since the war began in April 2023, over 11.5 million people have been displaced internally, and more than 2.3 million have fled the country. Food shortages, including famine, are reportedly claiming hundreds of lives daily, while an additional 3 million people are facing acute food insecurity in 2024. Sudan's collapse has sent shockwaves through the already fragile region, exacerbating conflicts and political instability in neighboring states. The internal crises in Libya, Chad, the Central African Republic, South Sudan and Ethiopia have all been further complicated by Sudan's turmoil. The Congo Basin rainforests, which account for around 70% of Africa's forest cover, are the world's most vital terrestrial carbon sink. These forests are also essential to the water cycles that support the Nile River Basin and West Africa. However, only 14% of the region's land is protected, and since 2000, 30% of its forest cover has been lost, primarily due to unregulated commercial logging and mining. Currently, the forests are shrinking by 1 to 5% annually. Transnational criminal networks and armed militant groups such as the M23 are exploiting weak forest management to plunder this valuable resource. To ensure better protection, improved forest management is necessary, which includes enhanced awareness of forest domains and better coordination among countries in a regional strategy to combat transnational crime and illicit financial flows. In East Africa, Kenya made headlines after President William Ruto proposed an increase in taxes. The proposal sparked days of protests which escalated into widespread unrest and activist movements that garnered global attention, with many young people demanding Ruto's resignation. Fueled by economic grievances and ongoing frustration over scrapped tax hikes, the protests turned violent, resulting in casualties and numerous injuries. Demonstrators in cities across the country called for systematic reforms to tackle corruption and poor governance. And finally, protests in Mozambique have negatively impacted the country's tourism industries, with some travelers postponing their visits and others cancelling altogether. 2 Australian companies have announced the closure of their operations and their exit from Mozambique. The southern African nation has been engulfed in violence since the controversial presidential election on October 9th. The protests led by Venancio Mondlane stemmed from his claims that the ruling Frelimo party rigged the election. Meanwhile, South Africa has kept its Lebombo main border crossing with Mozambique closed, as Mondlane remains in hiding in South Africa. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
We are starting off with the wars that dominated the headlines in 2024. They may pause in 2025, But the question is, will peace return in our lifetimes? Before these parts of the world even forget what peace looks like? The sheer devastation has resulted in thousands dying in wars. Will the thousands who have lost babies and young husbands and brothers and sisters ever forgive and forget? How are they supposed to turn the page and start a new year? How are they supposed to start afresh? The wounds of Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, Ukraine, Russia are far too deep. The scars will not disappear. These young lives have been shaped by bombings, displacement, the unrelenting trauma of war. Will the present generation ever forgive those who have robbed them of their childhoods, their families, their homeland? Ukraine, once hailed for its resilience, now stands at the brink of an uncertain future. The battlefield depicting a grim picture, to say the least. There are various reports highlighting how Ukrainian troops, once celebrated for all their grit, are now utterly exhausted and devastated by the Russian forces. Earlier this month, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said approximately 43,000 Ukrainian soldiers have lost their lives since the war started, depicting the scale of casualties in this 3-year-long war. The Kremlin does not officially disclose casualty figures, but the figures are likely to be on the scale of casualties in Ukraine. Both sides have used mercenaries or, in Russia's case, sent about 10,000 troops from North Korea, tipping the scales further in Russia's favor in a way, who have reportedly captured over 2,350 square kilometers of territory in eastern Ukraine this year alone and marked key Ukrainian regions like Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia as Moscow's stated objectives for the year 2025. Across 2024, Volodymyr Zelensky repeated pleas to Western allies for more support. Advanced weapons like British Storm Shadow missiles, American ATACMS were supplied to Kiev. Yesterday, the United States announced nearly $6 billion in additional military and budget assistance for Ukraine. As per a Reuters report, in fact, the U.S. Congress has approved $175 billion in total assistance for Ukraine since the war started in February 2022. One reason why the wars might pause is because even allies of Ukraine are exhausted by the continuing demands. But the Ukrainian army reportedly finds itself stretched to the breaking point. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur who will lead the Department of Government Efficiency in the Trump 2.0 administration, reacted to Joe Biden's recent aid announcement for Ukrainian military aid on the platform X, seemingly mocking Zelensky by calling him, quote-unquote, an all-time champ. Now, his comment perhaps underscores growing frustration levels in America. As per experts, Ukraine is losing this war and Russia's advances have been relentless. The creation of a new map, in a way, with expanded Russian territories, they say, seems inevitable, as Moscow has made it clear that it is determined to redraw Ukraine's borders, cementing its dominance in the region. Will this result in the installation of a pro-Russian president in Kiev in 2025? Perhaps backed by President-elect Donald Trump? When Trump returns to power, it is expected that he will press for a ceasefire settlement that favors Russia.
What should Zelensky, if anything, be prepared to give up to end this war?
He should be prepared to make a deal. That's all. Got to be a deal. No, got to be a deal. Too many people being killed. That is a war that's hard. Too many people. Got to make a deal. And Putin has to make a deal.
What deal?
Do you think Putin has to make a deal? And Putin would have never gone in if I was president.
You see, the implications for Zelensky are dire. His political future, after all, is shrouded in doubt, and many experts are questioning whether he will survive the fallout of what increasingly looks like a lost cause. Trump, remember, has pledged to end the war in 24 hours. Now, let's just turn to West Asia, where the suffering has been profound. to say the least. Major stakeholders, both regional and international, continue to eye territorial gains, vying for control and influence over a region rich in strategic influence. A direct byproduct of this has been a devastating escalation in violence across Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, leaving thousands dead. According to the UN, in Gaza alone, over 45,000 Palestinians have lost their lives. The situation in Syria is also harrowing. As per the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 4,000 people have lost their lives this year, 2024. According to the Lebanese Health Ministry, the war with Israel has claimed more than 3,000 lives so far. As winter tightens its icy grip, the toll continues to rise. So does the suffering. Thousands of displaced families are now facing death from exposure. In Gaza, where temperatures have plummeted, at least 6 infants have lost their lives due to cold-related illnesses across Gaza this week alone. Imagine that. International aid organizations warn that without immediate intervention, this number could double. It is clear that the human cost in the Russia-Ukraine war and West Asia is staggering. A generation has been lost to war, to conflicts. For the children caught in these wars, the future appears bleak. Ceasefires have been brokered and broken. Civilians continue to pay the ultimate price. This is the year of death, a year that has shattered hopes for peace in both Russia-Ukraine war and West Asia, and the road ahead only appears dark and uncertain as of now, leaving us with the same question. Can peace ever truly return? With no clear path to peace as of now and the conflict escalating on all fronts, the answer seems more elusive than ever. The only certainty in these wars is uncertainty, and that will unfortunately continue into 2025.